All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to our 14th episode of Data Talks. I think we're going to stop counting after this one. This is a series of free 45-minute webinars about using local data to inform housing policy. My name is Claudia Aiken. I'm Director of New Research Partnerships here at the Housing Solutions Lab. This episode will explore the use of AI in local housing departments and specifically in the permitting process. If there's interest, I think we could explore future data talks about the use of AI in other aspects of local housing planning. But for now, I am delighted to be joined by my colleague, Satvik Amravati, who's our policy fellow here at the lab, and who will be sharing a brief presentation today. And we're very excited to have joining us Pamela McKnight, Chief AI Officer for the Louisville Metro Government, and Jacob Stock, a Senior Planner at the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. So I will start things off with just a very brief introduction to the lab and to the series, and then I'll turn it over to Satvik to share what we've learned about the use of AI in permitting. Then we'll bring in Pamela and Jacob for more of a conversation about how their agencies are harnessing AI. And finally, we will have 10 to 15 minutes at the end for your questions. So please feel free to submit those via the Q&A function at any time during the session, and we will get to as many of them as we can. So if you're not familiar with the lab, we are based at the NYU Furman Center. Our mission is to help small and mid-sized cities, especially, to plan, launch, and evaluate housing policies with the goal of advancing racial equity, health, and well-being. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that you'll also take the opportunity to view past episodes on our website or on our YouTube channel, and also register for upcoming ones. Each of these sessions will feature a fireside chat with someone like Pamela or Jacob who has that on-the-ground experience, and we also post some recommended reading as well. I'll drop the links for that in the chat shortly, but now let me turn it over to Satvik.
Thanks so much, Claudia, and I'll dive right in. So first, we're going to explore where AI overlaps with housing. It is currently estimated that over a quarter of American workers use some form of AI on the job. It's a trend that also probably holds true for those of you in the housing space. Localities across the country have established partnerships with providers of these technologies, allowing their employees to use AI on the job without breaching confidential data. Beyond the use of LLMs, large language models like ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude by staff, practitioners in the housing space have also been working to implement these technologies to solve long existing problems that their agencies, departments face, along with assuring productivity improvements brought in by these new technologies. Among the creative uses of AI in the housing space, three really stand out. One is the use of AI to consolidate planning data to aid in the operations of planning. This use remains far and few due to the inherent challenges and complexities of city planning. However, a range of companies, some that are questionable, have proposed using AI to aid in planning. Another interesting area where housing practitioners are leveraging AI is in mortgage underwriting. The well-established prop tech industry or property technology industry, along with countless startups, have pitched AI as a tool to improve the process of mortgage underwriting. While we'll not cover this use of AI in this webinar, as this is mainly geared towards local governments, the use of AI in this space also brings both concerns and opportunities stemming from the issue of discrimination and also the potential for improving efficiency and equity when done right. Finally, the use of AI in our conversations that has most excited local governments is in the permitting space. Seen as the process riddled with delays and backlogs, many governments are excited that AI will allow them to better serve constituents in this space. So, what is the motivation for cities to implement AI? There has been considerable excitement about leveraging AI to improve the permitting process, both on the local and national level. Last April, the administration published a federal memoranda instructing the adoption of AI to improve permitting conducted by federal agencies. While at a local level, there has been a push to adopt AI in permitting to achieving a few goals. One, agencies we talked to mentioned that their senior leadership is very excited about AI and really wants to bring it into local government. Local agencies dealing with housing, such as planning and permitting agencies, are also deeply understaffed, and it's incredibly hard to hire the required talent. Local governments are also facing budget woes, worsening the issue of understaffing. Government leaders face pressure from electeds nowadays to seek out efficiency improvements, and AI is seen as one of those tools that can usher in those efficiency improvements. Another more unique push has come from natural disasters. Pressure to rebuild fast and efficiently, such as after the LA wildfires, has led to many cities that have been devastated by fire, hurricanes to adopt AI in their permitting processes. Next, we're going to cover a few popular implementations that we found after talking to dozens of leaders across the nation and through our scan to understand how AI is being implemented in permitting. We conducted a scan and we found that over 19 jurisdictions in North America have some reported implementation of AI in how they permit or plan for new housing. What we found is that there's a great diversity in how AI was implemented and the size of the jurisdictions that were using it. Although larger jurisdictions like Los Angeles, San Jose, Honolulu were more likely to be implementing AI, we also found that smaller jurisdictions, such as Hernando County and Florida, are also implementing AI. Also, during our scan, three implementations really stood out as the most common. One was integrating AI-powered search on permitting websites, allowing constituents to find information in a more digestible manner. Another was the use of AI to provide applicants with virtual assistants. This remains the most popular implementation due to the wealth of tools that are already available. The final implementation that stood out was the creation of internal AI assistive technology designed to help permitting staff review applications. Note that our scan is largely based on going through press releases and RFPs and may be missing jurisdictions with non-public pilots. We would welcome participants to use the chat and the Q&A to let us know of any examples that we might be missing, as our scan is not comprehensive, and we would love to know about any missing or interesting use cases that you have encountered. Our first implementation is AI search, which has been implemented by the team at boston.gov. The city of Boston has been a leader in implementing AI throughout their government. The mayor is really excited about AI. A project that they rolled out last year was an AI search tool on 60 of their most visited pages, including the permitting page. The construction of the AI search tool was done completely in-house, which is very rare. They were an existing Google organization, so they used Google's AI tool, Gemini, in order to power their own tool. The AI search that they implemented differs from the current search model that they use on most websites that you might visit, which is a rank search model, since it only finds relevant, since rank searches only find relevant web pages based on keywords, but AI searches allow for the synthesization of information relevant to the question from those web pages. This is especially useful in something like permitting, where information can live on multiple pages, and it makes it particularly easy for constituents to gain information with a single query. As you can see in the screenshot on the right, this tool allows constituents to type in their question in natural language, and you can receive an easily digestible summary as a response. It also is completely closed loop, so there's no need to worry about hallucinations since the model only relies on information found on boston.gov. And so far, the feedback from this implementation has been really positive, with positive feedback being 23.4% higher on the AI search tool than the traditional search tool found on boston.gov. While this might seem like an easy add to the website, it required extensive data preparation, turning legacy PDFs into information that could be loaded into a model. And it also required significant technical expertise. There was a developer on the team that was familiar with Drupal, the tool that they were using in order to construct this AI search. The second implementation we saw was applicant assistance, which was implemented in Los Angeles following the LA wildfires. The state of California and LA County partnered with Archistar to improve the speed at which new residential builds get approved. The platform was built within 6 weeks and is currently in beta testing mode. It allows residents to gain information about their parcel in a singular pane, and the single pane provides information that usually straddles a handful of LA.gov websites. The tool itself uses a mix of computer vision, machine learning, and automated rule sets to check the submitted designs that a user might put in against local zoning and building codes. The e-check can check for compliance with the California Building Code, LA's Emergency Order 1, LA's R1 and RE zoning requirements. The goal of such a tool is to reduce the back and forth between applicants and permitting offices, allowing better productivity for permitting departments. This tool, the company making this tool, Archistar, is a very popular tool for jurisdictions across North America, including larger ones such as Vancouver. During a fireside chat following this presentation, you will hear from Pamela, who's the Chief AI Officer at Louisville Metro, whose team is piloting a similar implementation with GovStream. The final approach that we found interesting in our scan was the creation of AI-powered internal tools for permitting staff. This approach was undertaken by TRPA, the Tahoe Regional Planning Authority, who you will also hear from later. TRPA is a multi-state planning agency which undertook a partnership with Emulate Cities, a planner-founded AI startup, in order to build such a tool. Together, they built a staff tool that could pre-check plans, saving staff time. By checking the submission against the code, the AI tool shaved about 2 hours of work into 2 minutes. It also improves staff productivity, reducing the back and forth between staff and applicants. You'll hear more from Jacob, who's a senior planner at TRPA, who led this project during our fireside chat too. Now, comparing all of these three approaches, there are clearly significant upsides and challenges to all three. First, AI-powered search tools. These are low-risk, high-reward implementations of AI since they are closed-looped, preventing hallucinations, and can significantly improve the user experience as seen in the Boston case study. However, there are some challenges with this approach too. In our conversation with the team in Boston, they told us that their project was made possible by the presence of technical experts on their staff. Additionally, while it improved constituent satisfaction, it's hard to measure the impact that this tool had on permitting efficiency. Next, onto applicant assistance. These are by far the most popular tools, resulting in an abundance of vendors. Additionally, the visibility of these tools can make them alluring as they interface directly with constituents. However, to properly develop such tools, they require substantial staff time and commitment. Additionally, if hastily built, they can create risk as they might mislead applicants. The final approach we looked at was the development of staff tools. The implementation holds many of the upsides of applicant assistance while eliminating much of the risk brought by a public-facing tool. Staff tools allow staff to develop familiarity with the tool and make improvements in a very low-stakes environment. Additionally, critically, their success is contingent heavily on staff adoption. Staff hesitancy can make these tools moot. Furthermore, successful staff tools rely heavily on staff getting involved in the QA and development process to really develop a tool that is useful for them. Finally, we want to touch up on some considerations that cities should consider regardless of what approach they take to ensure project success. One, it is very critical to ensure staff buy-in and a tool to ensure staff are proactive in making modifications and changes based on institutional knowledge that data itself cannot capture. Cities should also be very mindful of the cost and time that it takes to build these tools. Elaborate AI configurations might not deliver substantial productivity gains and might take away from meaningful existing projects. These projects are extremely costly and time-consuming and require a significant learning curve. Finally, cities should make sure to right-size risk and ensure data security. Some cities have allowed vendor access to proprietary data, while others, like TRPA, have limited access to only public data, which reduces the risk of breaches. While AI might seem like a positive tool, it also it comes with the considerable downsides that cities should be aware of and consider. Good AI requires good data, and the absence of good data can result in what we call colloquially as slop. This market for AI-powered planning and permitting tools is full of companies selling products that produce inaccurate results. It's very critical that municipalities be aware of this and really double check the outcomes of their tools and really do extensive QAing. There's also real ethical and discrimination concerns with AI. AI is a black box and can result in discriminatory outcomes since it's only as good as the data it is trained on. It can perpetuate harmful patterns, and when developing AI tools, it is critical to be aware of this. Finally, regardless of cities implement AI, it is important to consider malicious actors. Malicious actors have themselves been using AI tools to harm city systems. A recent example is public comments at a LA area environmental hearing getting flooded by AI-generated comments that took down the entire system. Other concerns in general about the use of AI include environmental considerations. There's real concerns about the energy intensiveness of AI systems due to their compute demands, which have put real pressure on local electricity grids. Finally, a few recommendations. After taking a look at various implementations and having conversation with city staff at the front of implementing AI in government, we were able to come up with a few recommendations for those looking to implement this technology. One is that they should clearly identify a clear problem that they hope to solve with AI. Second, they should right-size expectations about cost, time, and project success. Third, they should work with vendors who have expertise and cut through the hype and advertising. And finally, successful implementations of AI saw it as an augmentative tool rather than a replacement tool. We recommend cities think of technology as augmenting their staff capacity and really work to secure the buy-in of staff.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, Satvik. And now I'd love to bring in Jacob and Pamela. And again, if you have questions about anything you just saw in the presentation, or if questions occur to you during our conversation, please put those in the Q&A because we'll reserve the last 10 or 15 minutes for your questions. All right, so Jacob, I want to start with you. You are a senior planner at TRPA, which, among other things, manages permitting and long-range planning for 5 counties in the watershed of the Lake Tahoe. And your agency had asked for more funding for staff, but were told to explore other efficiency improvements first. Can you tell us more about that and kind of how it led to TRPA exploring AI as a potential solution?
Yeah, thanks, Claudia. And thanks for having me too. It's a pleasure. Um, so at the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, like you said, we have a land use system. It encompasses 2 states, multiple counties, and so we have this really complex regulatory system. And that complexity means that our permitting staff are spending a lot of time working with applicants to get their applications to the point where they can even submit the application in the first place for review. When we started looking into this, we found that about 70% of the applications that we received can't even be reviewed in the first place because they're missing information or there's some other issue that makes it so that we can't even review the permit. So we have about two, or at least before we started this project, we had about two full-time staff who work just solely on intake of applications, getting them to the point where we can even review them in the first place. And then everyone else in our permitting team is spending, probably upwards of 30-40% of their time on that same work. So this was like a really important inefficiency in our system that we'd identified. Like you said, we asked for more funding for staff. Our board sent us back, said, okay, you got to solve some of these inefficiencies that we know exist. Um, so we went back, and I also want to add, this is an inefficiency for our staff. It's also an issue for our community members because that's a big additional time and cost barrier to building and renovating your home when you're expected to essentially take this exam. Um, I'm gonna get in trouble for saying that, but essentially take this exam to submit your permit. Like the point of these rules are to protect the environment, to protect health and safety of our community. And so if you're following the rules, you should be able to improve your property in a reasonable way. Um, so that was the problem at the center of this permitting improvement program that we started at the direction of our board to work on modernizing our permitting program, tackling some of these inefficiencies. And we were really trying to explore how to crack this nut, partly by digitizing our permit applications, which, as with a lot of jurisdictions of our size and larger, are still largely paper. Um, and that was when we met Emulate Cities, which is a startup company working in this space. And so they had some big ideas about building AI tools for city planners, and we're looking for some test cases to build their technology. And we had this problem for them to work on, and the motivation to really innovate and try to solve this problem. And that was how we got started.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I want to turn to you, Pamela, now. And despite your name tag, which we couldn't even fix with Zoom AI, you are Pamela McKnight, the Chief AI Officer for the Louisville Metro Government, where you are managing, I think, several projects to integrate AI. So if you could share a bit about what has motivated Louisville to create a position like yours and to experiment with AI, that would be great.
Yeah, first of all, thank you guys so much for inviting me to the forum. I'm excited, and I'm excited to learn from Jacob as well and what you guys are doing in TRPA. The chief, our mayor, Craig Greenberg, and my manager, who's the chief information officer, really had, I think, saw an opportunity to get ahead of AI, which they saw as becoming really a force multiplier for public service. And they wanted to make sure that Louisville was considering how best to utilize AI to shape the results for our residents, how it can be applied, how we can enable our employees, and utilize it also to build public trust, which are important things for our city. And so instead of it's something they had been kind of working on in the background with AI, a few little AI projects here or there, but significantly required significantly more resources to define a strategy and start to really understand how we can leverage AI in a responsible way, make sure we've got the right guardrails in place, make sure that we're clear on how we are going to measure the outcomes, how does that really add value for our residents and our employees, and then how do we enable our workforce. And so they felt it was really important to carve this out as part of our Metro Technology Services Group, which is also IT, for the organization, and making sure that we're kind of putting all of those components in place, building the right framework, and doing that responsibly. So we're shaping it rather than AI happening to us. So that's how I got this role.
No, that's terrific. Yeah. And so, as Satvik kind of alluded to, the way that your two agencies are experimenting with AI in the context of permitting is a bit different. TRPA is currently testing a staff-facing application that speeds up the process for the staff reviewing the permits, while Louisville is piloting a tool that can assist the residents or owners who are applying for a permit. So could you tell us a bit more about these two different approaches? And maybe we'll start with Pamela this time.
Yeah, happy to answer that. Actually, it's interesting. The company that we're working with is called GovStream. It was part of a broad RFP process that was kicked off by Louisville before I joined.
Got
And
it.
so once I came on board, I was able to move forward with that, right? The RFPs were kind of waiting for me, if you will. Um, the company that we're working with, also a startup, we decided that as we scoped what the pilot would look like, we wanted to start with the applicant facing side because, as Jacob had said, a lot of the time that our staffs invest is in answering questions or reviewing applications and permits that are not complete, and then they're having to waste time for themselves and also for the applicants, right? There's just multiple delays in the system when that happens. And so we felt like it was really important to reduce the friction in the system at that point, because that is where we have the most problems. What it also does, and Jacob kind of touched on this, is it frees then the staff up to be able to really focus on where they need to spend time reviewing plans and how does that fit into overall strategy? How are they making sure that the codes are aligned? One of the approaches, and I'll put this in there, one of the things that we've done from the very start, and it echoes a lot of the data, is we wanted to make sure we were engaging with the users from the very start. So we actually brought in our codes and regs and our Office of Planning team as at the initial stages when we engaged with the pilot to really understand where the pain points are in the system and start to use that as a guideline for how we would approach the design for the applicant facing side. It also then feeds into the second phase of this, which will be more on the back end, like the staff facing side. How do we start to utilize that information in order to identify where there's compliance and how can we speed that process? So those are two sides of the same coin. We started on the applicant side, but we'll eventually get to the staff facing side. And it's super cool to see that Jacob started on the staff facing side. So
That's right. Yeah, I think it is a cool juxtaposition. And I know, Jacob, you all are also thinking about the public facing side down the road, but I wonder if you could tell us more about why you started on the staff side.
Yeah, this is really interesting. Thanks, Pamela, for that. Because I use the analogy of two sides of the same coin with this all the time as well. Because we're again like we're trying to solve the same problems here, but we're kind of approaching them yeah, from different sides. So yeah, we have this staff facing tool that we're currently using. It helps staff with their initial review of a permit. So a permit will come in. We have like a form that staff have to fill out when a permit comes in. And so this tool basically goes through that form and checks each part of the application against that form. It flags issues and inaccuracies in the application, clears clears anything that's a high degree of certainty that it's correct. And so that allows staff to be able to focus in really on important issues when they're reviewing an application. And so, like if you think about the issues that I was talking about before with like intake and inaccurate applications, you're like, okay, how does this really solve that that issue, right? So like the purpose of this tool was that it was designed to test and train the AI on our processes, on our code, and our permitting processes before we're launching something public facing that really takes a crack at that issue of intake and inaccurate applications. So, I wasn't going to get support from my managers to roll out something that goes straight to the public. Um, we needed a proof of concept first in order to do that, and we were able to also, create some efficiencies in our permitting department while we were creating that proof of concept. So the real goal, the like golden apple here, is that public facing tool that's going to assist people applying for permits, and we're building that tool right now with Emulate Cities. We plan to have something that's ready to be tested next month, actually. So, so we're moving ahead with that, but approaching it from the other direction, from opposite direction from what Pamela is doing in Louisville.
Awesome. Another question I have, and I think it, maybe captures some of the questions being posed in the Q&A as well, is about how you addressed maybe your own or maybe your colleagues or the public's concerns about AI. And what do you think the risks are, and how might you be working to minimize them? And maybe we'll start with you, Pamela.
Yeah. Actually, I wanted to, Jacob said something I think that connects in here from my perspective, which is making sure that we're not releasing something to the public that we haven't tested and tuned. So I think the inaccuracy, the privacy, the black box decision making, all of those are some of the biggest risks in that space. One of the things that we're doing, and as we're scoping this pilot, and actually earlier today was meeting with one of the builders. We have GovStream AI on site this week, and meeting with a group of builders, and we're starting with individuals like who do a lot of building, some of the bigger residential building companies, because they know the process and they know where the problems are. And we are utilizing them kind of as guinea pigs within our system to test it out and to give us feedback and to tune that. So I think that it is critical that you take that kind of approach to limit some of the risks. I touched on some of them, right? That accuracy. I think there's risk of bias in the system to some extent, depending upon how people input information. Definitely a privacy risk, and then the transparency in the decision making. We're addressing that by, that controlled training of the tool, also ensuring that we are testing and we're monitoring for drift in any of the AI algorithms that have been developed, or any of the assistants that are in place. And we are also making sure that we have human in the loop, right? Our goal isn't to replace the permitting team or our Office of Planning team who are looking at and reviewing plans and things like that. We want to make sure that we are speeding up their process, and helping them will be super important. Helping the permit applicants be able to more quickly fill out an application, look at what their plans are compared to the codes, give them feedback, tell them what they might be missing. That's the part that the tool can do. The actual validation and then submittal is something that the human has to do. They need to validate that. So those are some of the things that we're looking at.
That makes total sense. And maybe, Jacob, I could get a brief answer from you, and then we're seeing some great questions in the Q&A.
Yeah. So similar to Pamela, the purpose of the tool, and Satvik touched on this as well, is really to augment and help our permitting staff who are already way overburdened with work. It's not to replace any work that anyone has. It's really just to allow them to focus in on the important issues and work in a way that's more methodical and and less rushed and overbearing than it is currently. For buy-in for us is a little different in this first tool that we built, this internal tool, because the what we needed was internal buy-in. We didn't, we're not working with the public yet. The first piece was management support, which we had off the bat. Then we built an internal team, and we really focused on from the internal team is a mix of data folks and permitting folks and myself from long range planning. And so what we were looking for is really like open-minded people who also had the respect of their peers. And so that's, I think if you've worked in an organization for a while, like you kind of know who those people are, like who are the people who have soft influence with their peers and but are open-minded and willing to try new things. And so, we built a team with that kind of those types of people and started there. And then with this second tool, this public-facing tool, Emulate and our staff are starting to work with some contractors as well, people who are likely to be using that public-facing tool once it's live.
Great. Well, I'm going to pass it over to Satvik now, who's going to share a few questions from the Q&A.
Yeah, and touching on that last point, Jacob, we have a question about how TRPA staff feel about the AI tool. Do they feel like it's coming for their jobs? Do they feel like it's making them more efficient? What's the overall sentiment um, amongst the users?
Yeah, so the buy-in has been building. It's a great question. Buy-in has been building. We had a staff meeting when we first launched this thing, and I would say generally folks are excited about it. There was definitely a lot of skepticism as well from others. What we've done to address that skepticism is, we started with this initial team to work on designing and building the tool with Emulate Cities. Um, we started with that team. Since then, we've started fanning out and asking others to test and provide feedback, including some of the people who are, more traditional by the books kind of folks who would be less likely to want to adopt technology like this. And that testing and ability to provide input and feedback has built some buy-in. So that's part of how we've addressed, some skepticism.
Sounds great. Yeah. And then I think, Pamela, I'll throw this question to you. We've got a few questions about the reliability and security of AI. How do you ensure that your AI is reliable and isn't breaching any data or providing any wrong information to your constituents?
Yeah, so first of all, Louisville has a very, I'd say, progressive approach with data. We try to put everything we're a leader in terms of open data. So we try to make everything as transparent as possible. So a lot of the data that is actually within our permitting process is within our open data environment. So I think that is an important component, right? You need to be thoughtful about what data you're utilizing. So some of the guardrails that we've put in place is we are only testing or training this particular tool on things that are specific to Louisville, right? We're not searching the web. This is something that's being built based on specific codes and regulations. And there are hundreds of them, right? So that is imperative in order to ensure that you've got the accuracy and it's not just searching across wherever and pulling from what it deems to be appropriate. The other thing is within GovStream AI, they have a team of engineers who are they're tuning it specifically for our needs. And for what we are what our codes and regs would be looking for, how does Louisville approach those things, and then that is being exposed to the actual end users, right? It isn't just an open source kind of thing. The data privacy, it is one of the most important things. We have a lot of controls in place from a software perspective where we're monitoring. Our cybersecurity team is monitoring a lot of things. That is a key component of this, and will continue to be that, right? I think you have to be ahead of the cybersecurity and some of the risks in that space on an ongoing basis. So it is one of our top priorities is making sure that we, any data that is sensitive or private, that we are keeping it like under control and that we are monitoring to ensure that that's the case all the time.
Makes sense. And then we have quite a few questions about the RFP process. Jacob, can you explain how you guys decided to go with Emulate Cities, and how do you evaluate vendors that are capable of building these useful tools and which might overpromise and underdeliver?
Yeah, so I this might not be the best question for me because actually what we ended up doing is we got, pitched by some different vendors on technologies that were going to help us with this permitting improvement program that I described earlier. Um, and then we were introduced to Emulate Cities by actually a member of our governing board who'd met them through another think tank. And they were a young startup. We were their first customer, and we ended up bringing them in for their pilot under the RFP threshold um, to just see what they could do. So low cost, low risk situation that's probably, not everyone's gonna have that opportunity. But that's what we did with Emulate, and we've since, they've proven their worth, and we've since signed a larger contract with them. But so that's our story, which maybe isn't the most replicable, but is where we're at.
That makes sense. Pamela, I know that Louisville conducted an RFP. How did you evaluate, or I know it's before your time, but how did Louisville
Yeah.
go about evaluating vendors?
Yeah, I can absolutely answer that. So it was very rigorous RFP process, to maybe echo what Jake had said to some extent. A lot of the people who applied are startups, right? We're in the infancy of this technology, so there are a lot of startups. Being able to distinguish between who just has an idea and who actually can operationalize and scale a solution was really the goal of the RFP process. And the team had rubrics that they utilized. The rubrics had very specific criteria that was associated with it. Accuracy and risk controls were one of the key elements that we were looking at. How are they because they're dealing with government, they understand what the governmental needs are. Their process is audible and transparent, and then there's a clear change management process in place. So those are some of the things that we were looking at. The whole team understood going into this that we're not necessarily dealing with like mature vendors and suppliers. And that is one of the reasons Jacob said this, and I think it's a best practice pilot, right? Don't go in and sign a 3-year contract. Go in and set up a pilot and pilot it for 9 months or a year and identify, are they able to deliver and scale to your needs?
Well, as researchers, we really believe in pilots too. So that's great to hear. Thank you, Pamela and Jacob, so much for talking with us, being willing to join this webinar, and sharing your expertise with our audience. Thank you to everyone who's attended for your excellent questions. We look forward to posting a recording of this webinar so you can share it with colleagues if you're interested. Please let us know if you have ideas for a future episode. We would love to hear them. I've dropped Satvik's email in the chat, but also a link to Ask the Lab where you're welcome to submit any further questions or ideas that you have. Thanks once again, Jacob and Pamela, and we'll wrap it here.
Thank you.
Thank you all
Thank
so much.
you.
It's a pleasure.